The Ben Heck Show is brought to you by Element 14, the electronic design community and online store built for engineers and hobbyists alike. Join now and browse the store at element14.com.
In the year 2000, Ben Heckendorn built his first mod.
We can rebuild it. Smaller, better, portable.
Since then, he has continued his work, helping those in need with creative new projects. Got an idea you'd like to see built? Why not send it to the Ben Heck Show?
Oh, they're in B, guys, they're in B. Yeah, die! Yes, I just hit hour 150. How am I still single? Hold on a second, guys. I think someone's here.
What's this? A package from my old arch nemesis Mark Barley, president of the Able Gamers Foundation? There's a note.
Dear Ben, it is true that we were once arch nemesis, but those days have passed and now we more or less get along. Anyway, surely you're aware of the Rock Band stage kit, which has a fog machine and a light box. Could you connect 4 of these light boxes together? It would be totally awesome for the Able Gamers Rock Band party that we're having to raise money for a charity for gamers with disabilities. Please do this for me, or else I have no recourse but to once again plot your demise with great detail. Currently your friend, Mark Barley.
Well, I guess I can stop playing video games long enough to help Mark with his project. Now, normally a Rock Band lighting kit just has 1 lighting box, but we're going to string 4 of them together for his party. And to continue the rockin' spirit, we'll build a microphone with the game controls built right into it for the singer. That'll be very useful. Also, Jones has been complaining that his Rock Band guitar doesn't have the clicky strummer like Guitar Hero does, so we'll help him out with that too. And we'll be finishing up the Xbox 360 laptop in this episode. Sound fun? You bet it is. Let's get to work.
The first thing we need to do is take apart the Rock Band stage kit lights to see what we're working with.
So what we're going to do here is cross-reference this header to the pinout we found on the internet. Now, one thing we know is that the other side of all buttons, such as this one, is ground. So we can use that to find ground. Okay, there's ground. Sometimes, even though you're touching the pin, if it has solder mask, you might not get a good connection, so it might not always beep. So you have to push hard or possibly resolder it to actually get a connection and a beep. The design on the internet takes the power from one unit and spreads it across the additional units. As is seen by these 2 green wires here. I don't actually think that's such a great idea. Basically, as long as we send the data, which comes from these 4 pins here, that's all we should really need, data and ground. And we can just power the additional slave units with their own power supply. I think that would be a better idea. Okay, well, I've made the connections between the host unit and the slave unit. And basically here we've connected 2 grounds, the 4 data pins, 5 volts, and VDD, which is voltage for the integrated circuit. Okay, now that we know that it works, the next step is to reduce the complexity of it. Now, if you remember, the light kit requires an additional power supply from the big fog machine. And if you look at the test points here, there's 2. There's test point 5 volts and test point VDD. Now, if we hook it up at VDD, we see 3.1 volts. That's the logic supply, such as the integrated circuit. But if we go to the test point 5 volts, we see that we don't get 5 volts. So the 5 volts comes from a little extension port from the fog machine. So basically, USB power will power the circuitry, but it will not power the lights. Okay, well here's the next test. This is the slave board. And what we've done is we've just hooked up the data and ground from the master board to drive it. And I have a little battery pack here, and I did this really cheapy. Battery pack will give us 6 volts. The 6 volts there will go into the 5 volt test here. It should be close enough. and we have a 3.3 volt linear regulator there, which outputs 3.3 volts from that pin, and it will go into the VDD that we talked about, which will power the circuitry. Okay, well, our demonstrations have shown that you only need ground and then these 4 connections here to synchronize light kits. Now to wire them all together nicely.
A ribbon cable connects the 4 discrete data signals plus ground to a plug on the back of the slave unit. This is where it will get the data from the master unit. The brains of the slave unit are removed and the battery pack, regulator, and switch are put there instead. Each unit has an additional data cord so it can daisy chain the data to the next unit.
Stay tuned, because at the end of the episode we're going to demonstrate all the light kits being used together. Now, let's finish the Xbox 360 laptop. We've got our base here. Let's put the motherboard into it. We mark where all the screw holes are going to be in the case. Then we drill them. Now I'm drilling them all the way through so we can put the screws into the bottom of the case, put them through the motherboard, and then put nuts on. That'll hold them in place well. And then we drive through the screws. Bam! With all the screws in place, we can then set the motherboard down on top of them. And then we secure it with nuts. They'll go right down like this. And we'll make sure that they stay there by using some Loctite. All right, time for the AC input. We took the old power jack off of the Xbox power supply and moved it out here and attached 2 sets of wires. Now, we've used the proper colors, black and white, and that's for live and neutral. That's what they call it in AC. So one set goes to the Xbox 360's power supply, and the other set goes to the LCD's power supply. Okay, so we've got the AC plug glued into the unit, and it's got the 2 sets of wires coming off of it. So now we're going to work with the DVD drive. We want to make this flush so we can attach a plate, so out comes the Dremel, of course. Yeah! Ah, nice and flush. Gonna use some double-sided 3M VHB very high bond tape to stick the drive in place. With the drive in place, we can now insert the SATA cable and the power cable. Next, we hook the AC power wires into the power supply for the Xbox, and then we place it right here in the case. All right, we've got the motherboard in place, so now let's install the hard drive bracket. Goes right here. I seem to have made an engineering oversight again. Ahem, after making the proper adjustments, it's ready to go back in. So we plug in the power here, and then we put it in place. There's the drive. Next step is to install the power supply for the LCD, and it's going to go right here in this big open expanse. So we need to attach the AC to its input right there. And we'll screw this in place. You might recall in the original LCD that this power board attached to the driver board in the LCD via this plug here. Now we can reuse this to give us power. We took the header off the old board and we put it right here. And then we take the power wires from the LCD, we bring them down to it, and we'll solder them up. Here's one thing we still need to do, attach the analog audio. Now, if you look online, you can find the pinouts for the old multi-AV adapter, but basically we need right audio, left audio, and then ground. And then as you'll see here, these 2 pins have been soldered to ground. When you plug in the adapter that had the optical link, such as the one that came with the Elite, it basically tells the unit to output the video through the HDMI, but to output the audio through the analog. Because obviously we can't use the HDMI audio with our LCD computer monitor. Time to fill this part. We're going to start with the ring of light assembly, which we're going to mount here. I've made a laser engraved spacer plate for the diffusion, and it shows where the ring of light goes. So we flip it over, match it up, and then glue it. Glue it some more, and then add some white diffusing plastic so it looks nice and clean instead of, straight LEDs. With the ring of light secured, we then move on to the buttons. Now, as you might recall, we switched them all to regular push buttons, not the capacitance stuff. We've made this pattern so the buttons go in this little piece here, and we line them up. So we just have to space this out a little bit and then put some buttons here so it clicks nicely. Buttons are now in place, so we can move on to the speakers and sound amplifier. We've got some small speakers here, and those are going to be mounted in the corners where we have a few extra holes for the sound to come through. And then we have an audio amplifier here and a digital potentiometer here. Here's the audio amplifier all wired up. Basically, we put an up-down button control here on the digital potentiometer, and then the wiper, the digital potentiometer, either goes from 5 volts to ground, 0 volts, and that goes into the amplifier. And the amplifier uses the level of that signal from 0 to 5 volts to determine how much it amplifies the stereo output, which goes to the speakers via these 4 wires here. Okay, we've put the sound amplifier into the top of the case. Now we need to put an adapter here and here for audio and power. Now I'm just going to add these spacers here that will push down on the hard drive and help keep it in place when the lid's all together. Notice how we're putting these hinges right between where the screws are. That way when the case opens and closes, there's a lot of force, being pushed onto the hinge, but since we have it near a screw instead of not near a screw, the case can absorb it better and not deform. Now we'll put in some size 6 screws to hold the hinge in place. Moment of truth time. Open her up. I'm going to be ironic and put in this Sega Genesis emulator. This system doubles as a portable Sega Genesis, thanks to Backbone Entertainment. Well, that was easy, and it only took 6 episodes to build. Now, back to our rock and roll themed mods. Now, the Rock Band Stage Kit also acts as the singer's controller for menu selection and such. This is kind of inconvenient, so for our next project, we're going to put those controls on the microphone itself. That way, they can get the Rockometer up over 9,000.
Microphone controller. When using the light kit, it acts as a singer's controller, so we put a header on the master light box so we can get the input signals off of its motherboard. A brief sketch to figure out what buttons to use and where. A, B, up, down, start should suffice. We sand the surface so the glue will stick, then decide where to put the buttons. We place them with super glue, and then surround them with hot glue later to fix them in place. Next, we pre-solder or tin the connections to get them ready. This makes it easier to solder the wires on. Ah, an old VGA cable. Perfect. We strip the VGA cable to the length of the microphone and glue it in place. This keeps everything as flat as possible in your hand. Wiring is simple, a single wire per button and a common ground connection, and the colors are written down so we can make sure the header plug end is wired correctly to the light box's motherboard. Using, you guessed it, Funky Foam, we make the surface level around all the buttons. This gives us a flush surface so nothing sticks out more than anything else. Finally, we glue on another layer of Funky Foam to create the surface for the buttons. Yeah, I know, it's not going to win any beauty contest, but it'll work.
Okay. Ooh, I just got an urgent call from Jason Jones about his guitar. I better get over there right away.
It doesn't click. How can I live like this? Jimi Hendrix didn't have to put up with this crap. I've been a fool. Will you take me back? Farewell, old friend.
Stop! We can rebuild it. Stronger, faster, clickier.
Tell me everything's gonna be alright.
We'll do our best. We have the technology. Okay, we've opened the guitar. Now this actually has a magnetic reed switch. This actually works magnetically. But as you can see, there's no good feedback. So we're gonna make this clicky and solid. Okay, so we're gonna take these two things out and snip them and replace them with some more tactile switches.
Is everything alright in there?
All right, so now we're gonna use the Ben Heck glue method. Put the switch in and then basically just position it so it sounds and feels good. Okay, so now we put on a second switch, and the main thing is to make sure they're positioned equally. That is, equal movements on the strummer up and down activate it, because you don't want one to have a different amount of throw than the other. Let me show you how to hook up these snap action switches. Now there's two ways you can hook them up. You always have one on the common pin, but then there's normally open and normally closed. Normally open means that you have to push the switch to activate it. Normally closed means the switch is already activated and you push the switch to deactivate it. So we're going to want to hook it up to normally open. Alright, so let's just solder up the existing wires to these switches. Ah, smells good. Alright, well that should do it. Now let's test it out. Jones, you have a beautiful clicky guitar. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ben. Listen to that clicky goodness.
Okay, Jones, I know you're having fun with the clickiness, but let's go test out the light kit now.
Alright, sounds like a plan.
And there's a fog machine.
Nice!
Well, was there any anthrax in the package from my arch nemesis?
I don't see any. Let's see. Oh, it's fog machine rules. Use in well-ventilated areas only.
Check.
If your smoke detector is activated by the fog, you should increase room ventilation and or turn off the manual power switch for the fog machine.
Check.
Do not place the fog machine on sensitive flooring, carpet, or tabletops.
Check.
It is recommended that you place the stage kit on a cookie sheet or other suitable tray or cardboard sheet to protect the floor from liquid drops or condensate.
Upon receiving the light kits, Mark Barley and the Able Gamers Foundation were able to rock and roll all night and party every day.
This one goes to 11.
The Ben Heck Show continues next week with a new shop, new projects, and new fun. We'll also be taking a closer look at the portable workbench you saw in episode 4, as well as the Xbox 360 laptop, which you can still register to win at element14.com/TBHS for the Ben Heck Show. Look for the Xbox 360 laptop graphic to register. We'll see you next time.
The Ben Heck Show is made possible by our sponsors at Element 14. For more information on all my projects and for a list of all the parts I used today, visit element14.com. Visit their community in the Ben Heck Show group using the URL below. We'll see you next time.